Emily Alfred from T. I've known for a little bit, and she is one of the most knowledgeable people I have ever seen on waste issues. She is awesome in that respect. So I'm just going to introduce her very briefly. And T is, if you're not familiar with it, is a nonprofit organization that has been working to build a greener city for all from over 30 years. Is the Toronto Environmental Alliance is the full name for T. Emily works with communities, researchers, businesses, and elected officials to research, implement, and advocate for zero waste programs and policies at the municipal and provincial level. This involves working with resident and staff teams in high-rise buildings and convening the Reusable Toronto initiative to advocate for a shift from single-use foodware to reusable alternatives. So that's a brief introduction to Emily. And I hope that you give her your full attention and have lots of questions afterwards, because she is a font of knowledge. So over to you, Emily.
So thank you for the introduction. As Caroline said, I work for the Toronto Environmental Alliance. I'm the waste campaigner. And tonight we'll talk a little bit about sort of the state of waste in Toronto. I'm going to tell some fun stories about our high-rise project and then some of the other projects we're working on. And I hope this will give you some ideas and examples about what you can do on your own and as a community. And we'll have lots of time for questions at the end. Okay, so as Caroline said, the Toronto Environmental Alliance has been around for 30 years. We focus on working with community groups, individuals, workers, and our vision is to create a healthy and equitable city that is a greener city for all. Equity and environmental justice is an important part of our approach. We don't want to just talk about the environment for environment's sake. We want to think about the impact of climate change on vulnerable communities and think about, pollution and how it affects some people more than others. So we're really focused on creating an equitable city. As the waste campaigner, I get to do I love my job. I just want to say that when I start. I do research. I get to go to City Hall and talk with city councillors. I get to pore over the city budget notes. Last week, we sent in submissions to councillors with our concerns about the waste budget. I get to talk to media, as Donna just pointed out, and I get to work with communities, talking with people all over the city about waste and hearing about their concerns and doing projects that help advance more zero waste ideas and really prove what's possible. So, before I jump into some of those cool stories, I just want to start with some high-level principles and thoughts about waste. One reason that I really like talking about waste so much is that waste is a really great entry-level environmental issue, and it's a real accessible environmental issue. It's not like electronic cars or electric cars or solar panels, where you might have to be a homeowner and have, the right amount of money and the right time and the right place to really invest in those things. Everybody, no matter how old they are or where they are in the city, at some point in the day has something in their hand and they need to decide, does this go in the garbage, the recycling, the organics, or somewhere else? And all of us have to think about this. And this really creates that moment where we can say, why doesn't this go in the recycling bin? Why is this thing covered in so many layers of packaging? Why is this company allowed to make this packaging that isn't recyclable? And why don't I have organics in this building, but I have it in another building? So not only is it something that we can all understand and we can all have agency over, but it also is a window into the larger systems of how our society operates and some of the environmental problems that we need to address. So I'll start. I just want to take a second to talk about waste and how it fits in with the city's climate plan. So the City of Toronto has a transformed TO and net zero target by 2040. So this includes, as we can see in this graphic, waste makes up 9% of Toronto's greenhouse gas emissions from a sector-based perspective. This is emissions from Toronto's landfills and organic digester. The city has a goal to address this sliver of waste or greenhouse gas emissions by reaching Toronto's 70% diversion goal by 2020, reaching 100% organics diversion by 2025, which is a great goal, but I have to be honest, the city has no plans to get there, so I'm not really sure where that's going. There's an ambition to have zero waste in city facilities and renewable energy from organics and landfill. So this is a really great success story that I wanted to share. The city of Toronto has anaerobic digesters for managing organics. So there's one organic digester that's currently up and running. A second one is coming online this year, and a third one will be operational by the end of 2028. And all of the organics that are collected from Toronto households and schools and community centers goes to this large facility. And on the bottom right, you can see this big green tank. That's a hydropulper. So all the organics go into this big machine. There's these giant claws that sort of rip open all the bags. The plastic floats to the top. The metal and glass and other heavy things float to or sink to the bottom. And then all the organics are pushed into another tank where they digest and are processed for about a few weeks. And the digestate that comes out is sent to a composter. So what I really like about this is these are owned by the city of Toronto and they're on city land. So this is the city dealing with its own organics on city property within the city limits. And now the city is capturing the methane from those digesters and turning it into renewable energy. So this is a little diagram. I won't go into it because I got some other things to talk about, but what's great is this is renewable energy from organics that will be running the city's garbage truck fleet, which runs right now on compressed natural gas. It will be running on renewable natural gas. The next thing in the city's climate plan that I'm actually really excited about is that the city has committed to doing a consumption-based emissions inventory. It's expected that we're going to hear more about this later this year. And this is where, instead of just looking at the greenhouse gas emissions that are coming from buildings in the city and transportation within the city, it's about all of the materials that are being imported into the city every day for food, for buildings, all the products we import from different places, and the environmental footprint of all of those items. What this does is it really helps us think about, is the city supporting urban farming? Is the city supporting local manufacturing or ways to reduce consumption? So this is going to dramatically change what our emissions inventory looks like, and it's going to force us to think a lot more about sustainable consumption. So this is a really great commitment by the city, and I'm excited for this when this happens. And this is really because, when a lot of us think about waste, for a long time we think about litter or about plastic or about landfills and things ending up in the wrong place and the harm that can have to wildlife and to the environment. But for a lot of things, while most of our attention is on those things, we really need to think about where those things come from. The bigger environmental impact for most things that we touch in our day actually happens before it even reaches us. So it's not just about what happens at the end of life, but all of the mining, the logging, the oil and gas extraction that went into creating those products in the first place. And when we just throw them away, we're wasting all of that effort. So one way to characterize this is that we're in a linear economy. It's a one-way throwaway system where resources are used once, turned into a product for us to consume, and then we send it away. And the environmental impacts are externalized, and recycling or composting are just seen as ways to reduce the amount of waste, but not really to change the whole system. What we need is to shift to a circular economy. So this recognizes the value in materials and doing what we can to keep those resources in circulation as long as possible. So this is when we consume less, when we redesign things to last longer, having regulations like the right to repair something so you can repair it and reuse it, supporting programs that can help us dismantle and refurbish things, with the idea being that we're no longer having to extract new resources or send things away to someone else to be someone else's problem as waste, but really to focus on conservation. And this creates a regenerative, supportive economy that is based on labor and resource conservation, not exploitation. So that's, the circular economy. What I like about this is it really links a lot to climate goals. It's about reducing consumption and about reducing or thinking more carefully about how we use materials. The City of Toronto has a circular economy strategy, and they have a circular economy procurement policy and a few other activities that I think are really great, moves in the right direction. So I'm going to shift gears. So if you have questions on that, please put them in the chat and we can talk about them after. But now I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Zero Waste High Rise project, and then we'll come back to some concepts around the circular economy at the end. So the Zero Waste High Rise project was a really fun project, and it's something that T has been working on for a number of years. We worked with researchers at the University of Toronto, and we wanted to work with high rises because 55% of Toronto households live in multi-unit buildings. A lot of the city's education and focus around waste and recycling and energy conservation really focused on people who live in single family homes. But we have more and more households in these high rise buildings, and we know that they're not reached as well by city education and city outreach. So we wanted to look at what's going on in these buildings and how can we work with these communities to help them, be better stewards of the environment. Unfortunately, what we've heard is that while single family homes have a waste diversion rate, that means 64% of waste from a single family household is recycled or composted. When it comes to multi-residential buildings, that number drops to 28% or less than half. I think these numbers are actually a little bit higher than they are now. They've actually gone down in recent years. So there's been a real tendency among the waste industry and sometimes among city officials to blame residents of multi-unit buildings, saying they don't care about reducing waste and will never reach our diversion goals. People who live in multi-unit buildings are just lazy or not interested. And I'm offended by that thinking because I don't think that's true at all. And what we were really excited about is that we found some buildings in Toronto that actually are doing better than single family homes, that are absolutely being amazing model buildings with diversion rates over 80%. And we wanted to understand, what is it about these buildings that makes them so successful, and how can we share those lessons to more people across the city? So with our project, we partnered with researchers, as I mentioned. We had students who we signed up 15 to 20 buildings across the city, and we got groups of staff and residents at each building to commit to being part of our project. Then we sent students in to dig through their garbage, recycling, and organics and assess what they saw and identify whether there were mistakes in the recycling, what amount of garbage was going in the organics bin, and sort of help make some, quantify what their performance was. Then we went around their buildings and visited and took stock of their waste setup, and then met with the building staff and residents to develop a plan and talk to them about what they wanted to do. We did surveys of residents, and one thing we found is that there's some of the main reasons about why people don't recycle isn't that they don't care or that they're not interested. It's that recycling is confusing, that it's really complicated to separate packaging, or that maybe the bins in the building are inconvenient to get to. So with this information, we were able to show that to improve waste diversion in all these buildings, we need to work on access, information, and ensure that there is real motivation, which is something that's often overlooked. In our project, on average, garbage was reduced by about 25% in all of the buildings. Some of them had double or triple the amount of recycling and organics diversion rates, and most of them lowered their contamination, and they all added new diversion services. There was also a lot of reporting from staff in these buildings that they felt more proud of their job and they felt more appreciated by the residents in the building. So access is something as simple as having recycling and organics bins everywhere in the building. You can see on the right, there's a picture of a building that had giant oversized recycling and organics dumpsters in the back, but there were a number of seniors and residents in wheelchairs that couldn't get to those bins. So they added organics chute in the hallway. Another building added a dozen different bins for recycling batteries, cell phones, markers, and everything that you can think of to show to make it as easy as possible for residents. This is actually something that multi-unit buildings have an advantage over single-family homes, and that the shared space can become a way for it to be easier for residents to sort their waste. What I actually don't have a picture of here is a number of the buildings started a sharing shelf where residents could leave things that they no longer want, and then other neighbors could pick it up. And then at the end of a few weeks, someone would go and take the leftovers to charity. On the right in this picture, we have a co-op downtown. They added cooking oil recycling. So this is not only recycling cooking oil for the residents, but it's also avoiding a lot of plumbing costs for the building. Simple things like putting up signs everywhere you go in the building really makes a simple difference, but it's something that's often overlooked. Some of the green teams in each building would make their own custom signs that would be based on the languages spoken in that building, or get the kids involved in making signs. And then the working together as a team was really what we found as one of the most important factors. Having residents work together, even working on the smallest activities, really created this sense that our building cares, and people in our building care about this issue. So it would keep up the energy of people who want to do something. It would come up with new ideas, and it also created a real sense of support for the staff. So these are just some tips that we've learned, and they can be applied to other communities, like church communities, in terms of creating a green team and then coming up with a systematic plan and just following through and realizing that even if there's only a few people on your team, other people in the building are noticing. And then finally, one of the most powerful communication tools that we found in our project was inspiration. So our project started because this man on the left, his name is Princely. He is the superintendent for a building in Scarborough. And his building, we made a video about it. I can send the link after in the chat. I don't know if we want to watch it now. I think it's more fun for you to watch on your own. They went from 20 garbage bins per month to just 20 garbage bins a month to just one for a building with 283 units. So this is a massive undertaking. They said that when they first did these changes and became a zero waste building, staff from the province, staff from the city came to visit their building because they didn't believe that they had so little waste. And it's because they made some big changes. One of the most important changes they made was that they converted their single garbage chute in their building to be an organics chute. So organics is actually the largest single category of household waste. It's about 50% of household waste. So this means that the smelliest, heaviest garbage, that is the grossest thing, you can just dump at the end of the hall. So he's standing here in the garbage chute room with the organics bin open. So residents can just take their organics down the hall, dump it in the chute, and they're done with it. And then the garbage, they're more inclined to sort well, and then they only have to take garbage and recycling downstairs. In addition, the staff at the building give out clear bags for residents to bring their recycling down, and then they pick up the bags, they take a look at it, and if they see any contamination, they pull it out. And that way they keep their recycling super clean. So their building's a big inspiration. And like I said, I can share a video about what they did. And then after a few years, we have another building that's also done the same thing. And we've got a second video. So those are just some fun. I'm not going to play the video now. Sorry. Okay. So, and then finally, if you have a building or, like I said, with a church or community group, you can go to our website we have called the Zero Waste High Rise Project Online Program Pathway. And what we try to do is we don't have the resources to go into every building and do a detailed waste audit and do a survey, but we've created a series of online forms so you could walk yourself through that process. So doing an assessment of your current assets and how the building is doing, making a plan for what you can do to reduce waste, and then measuring and celebrating the results. And we've got videos and stories, like success stories about what some of the other buildings have done. So I think that's a tool I hope that you'll find useful. Okay, take a bit of a breath. The next thing I want to talk about is about single-use plastics. And I'm calling it Reusable Toronto here because this is a new project that we've been working on, and I think it's particularly relevant. I don't know if you have heard recently about the federal regulations to ban certain single-use plastics. The federal government is working on this right now, and I think this is going to make a big, this is going to have a big impact on Toronto. Here we go. So some of the facts. I think a lot of us know that single-use plastics and single-use items are a problem. Right now, it's estimated that plastic production is expected to triple by 2040. Even though a lot of us think that there's probably too much plastic in our lives, there's going to be a lot more. Half of all plastic produced every year is used just for single-use packaging. So plastic wraps and packaging and things that are used for sometimes just a few seconds. Only 9% of global plastic is recycled. Unfortunately, this statistic also applies to Canada as well. It's not your blue box, so I can clarify that later if someone has a question about it. And then, the other rough estimates are that Canadians use 1.6 billion single-use cups every year. So it's not just plastic. It's about all single-use items and foodware and packaging that is used just once and then thrown out. Foodware in particular, so that's, cups, cutlery, styrofoam containers for food. That's something that we're focusing a lot on right now because it's very difficult or impossible to recycle these materials. And that's usually because of the amount of food on them, special coatings that are put on them to make them waterproof and greaseproof. And the other bad news, I don't know if any of you have seen this, but there's this sort of myth about sustainable single-use packaging. So you may have seen products that are called compostable. You can get a coffee that says, or a coffee cup that might say it's biodegradable or compostable, or a clear plastic cup that looks like plastic, but it says it's compostable. Well, I'm sorry to say that that is not actually a solution. The fact is that there are these different terms, compostable, biodegradable, bioplastic. They're not really regulated. Right now, there are some certification systems, but there's no federal legal definition. And they can cover a really wide range of things. So paper products, something that's wood, something that's plastic, something that looks and feels like plastic. And some bioplastics are even made of fossil fuels with just a small percentage of plant-based plastics. So each of these materials has a different sort of downstream composting need that most composters in Canada can't deal with. The city of Toronto does not accept these things in the green bin because that giant anaerobic digester I described earlier, it's designed to remove contamination and remove anything that looks like plastic or foodware. So it can't tell if it's compostable plastic or not. It just gets scooped off and sent to landfill. This is the case in almost every municipality in North America.
Yeah, our church was spending extra money for the compostable cups, and the city said no, don't bother.
Yeah,
they're not getting composted.
And it's unfortunate. I think the fact is that a lot of people really are well-meaning and spending extra money on those products that cost a lot more, and there are a lot of businesses that are looking at that. But it's not necessarily fair to be selling those products to people who don't know that they're not actually being composted. And as I mentioned, there's an upstream impact. So when things like bamboo or things that are grown specifically to be turned into plastic, there's sorry, my cat's just come to visit. I'll try to keep her off my keyboard. Those things have an upstream impact on water, on using agricultural land to grow plastic instead of to grow food. And unfortunately, there's also some toxic additives and coatings that have been found on paper type of compostables to make them waterproof. That sort of shiny inner layer can be toxic. So all this is to say, really what we need to do is we need to focus on reusables. So this is why T has convened a group called Reusable Toronto. And we're trying to bring together all of the new reuse businesses, zero waste stores, zero waste champions, and people who are interested in helping shift our city away from disposables to reusables. Because I've seen there's so many different people working on this, and we just wanted to create a place where we can come together to sort of talk about these solutions and advocate together. So, as I mentioned similar before to the circular economy concept, we can't recycle or compost our way out of the single-use problem, so we need to focus on reuse. Fortunately, there's a lot of strong public support for this. The City of Toronto has been looking at developing a single-use and takeaway items reduction strategy. So eliminating single-use, not just single-use plastic. And they found overwhelming support from the public to pass regulations. Businesses have not necessarily been as supportive, but I think that's where the city needs to provide support. We also did some research with the University of Toronto trash team, and we found similarly, a lot of people think businesses need to do more, and, they want reusable options. So I'll share a few facts. I've been doing a bit of research lately on the benefits of reusables. Because, something, when we shift to reusable containers, there are sometimes companies like the plastic bag industry or people who point out that reusable dishes and reusable containers are actually heavier and take up more resources because they're more durable, and you have to wash them and you have to transport them. So, would they be maybe a bigger environmental impact than a single-use disposable product? And I can happily say, absolutely not. Reusable is always better. There's a bunch of reports done by the UN Environment Programme, the World Economic Forum, Zero Waste Europe, Upstream Solutions in the US, and all of them did a meta-analysis of what's called a life cycle assessment. And that looks at the upstream impacts of reusables or the upstream impacts of a product. So the resources needed, the energy needed, the water pollution needed caused by creating a product, the amount of pollution or energy used when you're using the product, and then thinking about the end of life. And they found that looking at dozens of these different studies, reusables always come out on top. So I'll share a few stats. For example, a stainless steel fork, if you use it just twice, it has a lower environmental impact than single-use ones, just twice, because the amount of water and energy that goes into making a plastic fork is actually so much more than you realize. Similarly, making 500 single-use paper coffee cups requires 1,400 liters of water. In contrast, if you wash a single ceramic mug 500 times, that only needs 200 liters of water. So some of these stats are really eye-opening, I think. When we look at climate impact, this group called Upstream put together this comparison of the facts. And they found that when you look at the full life cycle of disposable cups, so that's paper cups, plastic cups, so-called compostable cups on the left side, we can see the carbon footprint is 3 to 10 times higher than using a reusable ceramic, stainless steel, or glass cup. Those are the ones on the right. A study in Quebec in 2014 calculated the cost to serve a cup of coffee every day for a year. So if you had to buy 365 paper cups and lids and pay for the waste to haul those away, that's 10 times higher than buying one ceramic mug that can be used 500 times, even when you include the cost of washing it. They also did some more calculations, and they found that even if you only use the mug 100 times, it's still just a third of the cost of disposables. There are some great case studies that show that reusables save money for businesses as well. There was a project in the US funded by the Clean Water Foundation called Rethink Disposables. And they worked with over 300 restaurants, schools, and universities over the last decade to help them switch some or all of their disposables for reusables for dining in. So you can see in the picture here, someone could get a salad with a plastic fork and a little sauce cup, or they just switch to a reusable dish. They found that on average, they went back to 130 of them and confirmed every one of them had saved money. They usually had a payback period within a few weeks to months. On average, they saved between $3,000 and $12,000 US and reduced waste by between 500 and 1,000 kilograms. They also found that most businesses underestimate the amount of money that they spend on disposables, and most of them think that the cost of buying new dishes and the amount of time they're going to have to spend washing dishes is way higher than it actually turns out to be. So when they went back to them, the businesses admitted that they really didn't realize how much they'd saved. Another benefit of switching to reuse is that reuse creates 50 times more jobs than sending the same amount of waste to a landfill or an incinerator. And that's because reuse jobs are local jobs. So if you think about it, you can't, if you've got a reusable cup or reusable dishes, you've got to have a local person who's washing those dishes. They have to be distributed locally. If you've got a reusable mug that you can take home and send back, it's got to all be done locally. You can't export that or send that offshore, and you can't import those things. It's all local jobs, and that's part of a local circular economy. So it's a big economic opportunity as our city looks at how to reduce waste and how to shift toward the circular economy. So I've talked a little bit about the problem and talked about some of the benefits of reuse. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the solutions that we're seeing and that we're advocating for as Reusable Toronto and with some other groups as T. So first of all, this is about accessories on request. This is the policy that's being passed increasingly. I think it just got passed in New York State last week. There's also the town of Banff in Alberta just passed this, I think also the week before. It's a regulation that requires that restaurants ask you before they give out accessories. So instead of just automatically handing out utensils, plastic forks, wooden chopsticks, packets of ketchup or soy sauce, they have to ask if you want it first. It's a really simple solution. It actually saves businesses a lot of money, so they like it. I found when we did our research and we interviewed businesses, we found that many of them realized they could save a lot of money, but they're afraid of getting a bad review if a customer gets home and finds that they don't have that thing in their bag. So businesses would rather err on the side of just putting those things in there. So as I said,
including throwing in 10 ketchup bags, for example.
Exactly. Especially, if you're bringing it home or back to your office, you don't necessarily need all those things. Another change that we think could have a really big impact, and this is something I'm really excited about, is requiring reusable dishes for dine-in. It's kind of so simple. It's surprising that we haven't done it more. But a lot of restaurants, even if you're staying, you go to a coffee shop, they give you your coffee in a disposable cup, but they could give it to you in a reusable cup. And there's actually cities and countries around the world right now are passing laws to require that. So this picture is a McDonald's meal served in France. As of January 1st this year, restaurants are no longer allowed to serve food in disposable containers if the customers are staying in. So they have reusable spoons, they have reusable baskets, they have reusable cups, and they have to deal with washing those on site. So these major chains that are lobbying and arguing against those sorts of regulations are doing it. So we know this has also been passed in California, and recently the city of Edmonton passed a regulation that all restaurants will have to have reusable cups for when you dine in. And the city of Banff has also passed a regulation that restaurants will have to serve you in reusable dishes for dine-in. Another one is maybe one that a lot of us are familiar with, and this is about bringing your own cup. So a lot of us right now, so I don't know if any of you know Roncy Reduces or the various Reduces networks around the city where, community members are just giving up their time to go door to door, talking to businesses in their neighborhood and saying, would you let me bring my own cup or container? And doing that can help a business say, yeah, I'll do that, and put up a sticker in the window so customers feel more comfortable doing it, encouraging more people to do it. We found that in our research as well, that a lot of businesses are willing to accept when customers bring their own container. They just don't really advertise it or promote it. So this is a regulation that is being passed in some places, and the City of Toronto is considering it right now, that you can require that a business has a written procedure and a sign explaining under what conditions they would accept your brought-in container. This makes it easier for staff. It makes sure that everyone's following health regulations and understands it. And it's a really good way to ensure that there's a free option for people so that they can easily get a coffee or food to go. The City of Vancouver has passed this regulation in July last year. And another exciting solution, I don't know if any of you have seen this, but it is reusable foodware for takeout. So you want food, you don't have your container with you, you don't have time to sit down, but you still want to take it out. Well, you can have reusable takeout foodware. So right here, I've got some pictures of businesses from Toronto. So on the top left, we've got the Muse cup in 3 different sizes for getting your coffee cup. On the bottom left is Supply. They provide reusable takeout food containers to a number of great downtown restaurants and even some catering for some film studios. On the top right is Inuit. They also are doing some catering. And on the bottom right is it's a pizza box. Because I don't know, I love getting takeout pizza, but I can't stand the amount of cardboard for a pizza that I'm going to eat really, really fast. So they've got reusable pizza boxes. So the way these work is it's like a library. They have slightly different models, but you go to the restaurant, you order You maybe have an app, or you pay a deposit to ask for your food in a reusable takeout container. You can leave the restaurant with it, and then you bring it back to either get your deposit back, or they scan it on your app, and then everyone's happy. It saves businesses money. They've been priced to be lower cost than single use, and it creates a nicer eating experience. In Germany right now, they've passed a regulation starting January 1st, so just a few weeks ago. Every restaurant has to offer some sort of reusable takeout option. So you go to a fast food place, a small place, they have to have a reusable takeout option that they will give to you for the same cost or less than a single use, and that you can bring back. So the reason I keep mentioning these policies is these aren't just pie in the sky environmentalist ideas. These are things that other people have put a lot of effort into and are actually happening around the world.
And Ontario has shown that people are willing to bring back beer and wine bottles, almost 90 or 95%.
That's a fantastic example. Yeah, right. The beer store is a great example. Not only do you bring back those beer bottles, which has an amazing return rate, but I don't know if a lot of you know, but the brown bottles are actually refilled and reused. So those are actually shared among the major beer companies. The paper labels get cleaned off, they get sanitized, they get sold back to those beer companies, they refill them, and they go out. They get reused at least 15 times. So that's a story of reuse and return that's really successful. Here are some more examples of reusables for takeout. On the left is Friendlier. It's a group from Guelph. They're moving into Toronto now, and they offer like a reusable plastic container. And I put in A&W and Tim Hortons because in Vancouver, they offer a reusable takeout cup that you can borrow and return at their stores. And what I think is quite interesting is they don't offer those in Toronto. They offer them in Vancouver because Vancouver has regulations around this. So we know these companies can do it. And I think we should demand that they do it here too. Okay, and so last but not least, Toronto hosts a lot of major events each year at stadiums, arenas, and concert halls. One stat from a US group, they did an estimate that if a US stadium hosts 300 events each year, they will use more than 5 million plastic cups. Sports and event venues are actually a really good place to shift to reuse because if you think about it, you don't bring drinks into a stadium. You can't leave. Everything is bought and sold and consumed on site. And it's all controlled by the venue owner. So they can set the rules. A number of concerts and famous musicians have insisted that their events are zero waste. So they've switched. There are great examples in Australia and New Zealand. And some Toronto events, some smaller events like the Toronto Garlic Festival, the Withrow Park Farmers Market, and the Eco Fair have had reusable dishes at those events. So just to recap, the solutions that we're pushing for that we think can be really great: accessories on request, reusables for dine-in, bring your own, reusables for takeout, and reusables for events. And as you know, I'm really pushing on the policy thing because I think that there's a lot that we can do as individuals, but we really don't have time to wait for every company to decide to do the right thing and for every single person to have the time to figure out what steps they can take. So we need to put our energy into putting pressure on governments to take action. So as I mentioned at the start of this talk, the federal plastic strategy, there's a national Canada-wide strategy on zero plastic waste. And one part of that is including a ban on 6 single-use items. So these items, bags, stir sticks, those plastic rings for cans, utensils, styrofoam and black plastic containers, and straws. These items were chosen because they are a common type of litter. They're harmful in the environment. They're less harmful alternatives, and they show up consistently at the top of cleanup and litter cleanups on beaches and waterways. These items are also being banned in a number of other countries and across the EU. So it seems like it's a good list to start with. The ban is being phased in. So starting December, just about a month ago, it is illegal now to import or manufacture these items in Canada. And starting in December 2023, it will be illegal to use them or sell them. So we won't see these things in stores, and we'll see a lot of restaurants and businesses will have to figure out a new way to do things. And we hope that they don't get tricked and start using compostables, and that instead they use reusables. But this is what we're hoping for. Incidentally, T and a number of other environmental groups are actually calling on the federal government to expand this ban. We think these 6 items are a great start. They're going to have a real impact on our day-to-day lives and our experience, but there are other types of plastic we should be banning because we need to go further. And the oil and plastic industry is fighting the government in court over these. So we'll see how that goes. And then finally, the City of Toronto is also taking steps to reduce waste. The city's regulation has been in development since 2018. It's stalled a few times during the pandemic and before that. But it's important to know the city strategy is not just about plastic, but about reducing waste of any material type, because the city doesn't want people shifting to compostables or shifting to paper or shifting to bamboo, which all have their own environmental impacts. So right now, the city is currently in a voluntary program encouraging businesses to reduce waste, and we expect that there will be the regulations, which we hope will include those policy asks I just mentioned, sometime in 2023, sometime this spring. So this is, I guess my wrapping up part is, suggesting on what you can do when it comes to reusables and plastic. You can choose reusables and bring your own, or choose businesses that offer reusables. You can talk to your local restaurants and community about reuse. For your church and community groups, you can choose to have reusables at your own events. I also think it's important to talk to your elected representatives, councillors and MPs who are considering these kinds of regulations right now. And you can sign up on our website. We're inviting any group or organization can become an endorsing member of Reusable Toronto. And as an individual, you can sign up and get updates. Oh, sorry, this is my last one. My other tips: don't get bogged down by guilt. It is really easy when you know about a lot of environmental issues to get stuck by guilt. But I think we just need to remember that we're all doing our best. Start with one simple thing and add one more. Don't waste your energy on feeling guilty or worrying that it's a consumer choice issue. Really, these systems are quite big and we need to work together to address them. And that's why I think working as a community, it's a lot more fun and it's a lot more restorative to work with other people. So that's it. I hope I didn't talk too fast and go through too many things. So I'll just stop sharing there.
Emily, thank you. I don't think you went through too many things or talked too quickly at all. But we would welcome some questions. There's one in the chat right now, so we can just start with that, and then I hope that others will either put up their hands or write something in the chat. But I hope that people found that really useful. There was certainly, I feel I'm kind of up on most of this stuff, and I've heard Emily before, but in fact, I always learn new things. So thank you for keeping everything updated and always having something new and interesting and useful in your presentation. Okay, so the first question I had was from Donna. What is the best way to wash dishes at a church event? Use paper cups and plates, use ceramic cups and plates and put in the dishwasher. And I actually answered her just what we do at Rosedale. We use a fast, like an industrial dishwasher that's really, really fast, like it's like 5 or 10 minutes or something, and reuse. We had reusable cups. Back in the 90s, we bought a whole bunch of cups. It was some kind of an anniversary, and so we had a whole bunch made, and they've got the Rosedale logo on them, and that's all we use for coffee hour or any other kind of event. But Emily, do you have another? Yeah,
I would agree on that. I would agree. So fast industrial dishwashers are very efficient in terms of water and energy use. Almost every life cycle assessment or LCA report or review confirmed that commercial and industrial dishwashers are the way to go. And reusable dishes, especially if you're using them more than 100 times, at church every week, or if they're like heavy duty, meant to be reusable kind of those dishes, that is definitely the best way to go. That's going to be as much as possible, I would say.
So Emily, I've asked this question because I've had an uphill battle at our social events. including this past Sunday, where people did not want to use the dishwasher, and we have an industrial dishwasher.
Okay.
And the last time I did an event about a month ago, I did use we have lots of cups like Caroline, and we have lots of plates. So I did use them, and the only way I got to use them is if I promised to do all of the dishes, which was fine. But if you could give me some sort, and I know Peter's from our congregation here as well, like if you could give us some sort of data, some sort of comparison so we can educate people, because otherwise they're looking at the convenience factor. They're not even, quite frankly, looking at the cost. It's more, how is it affecting our environment that I think would probably get them to make a shift.
Yeah, so I've got a few stats in here. The one about the paper cups, I can send you some links. Maybe that would be an easy way to do it. We're trying to put together some of these benefits of reusables to make them more shareable, because we get this question. But yeah, definitely paper cups use more water than washing a ceramic cup.
And that's the argument I got against it on Sunday. It was, oh, well, the dishwasher uses more water. And I thought, I don't think so, because it's brown water.
No,
right?
it's a real, even if it's not brown water, it's still more efficient. It's just surprising the amount of water that's used to make a paper cup. Also, there's a lot of water used for recycling. So even if those paper cups were recyclable, which they're not, they're just garbage, there's a lot of water used for recycling. So I would say just dishwasher is the way to go.
And we have a fast industrial dishwasher. So
yeah, we definitely do.
We had shifted people for almost a decade to using that, but you had to have a whole volunteer crew every Sunday to do those dishes afterwards. And since coming back from COVID, just trying to promote coffee hour before and after church, people went with what's the simplest solution. And unfortunately, their thinking is nobody has to clean it up. It just goes in the garbage.
And before COVID, that crew that we would stay to clean up, were they using the dishwashers then?
Yeah.
Yes.
So is it just a different crew, or is it?
No, it's just people thought, hey, you know what? This is a lot of trouble. And they went back to the old way. Don't you think, Peter?
Yeah. In fact, one of the ministers was, in fact, one of the ones that said it's too much effort to get people to volunteer. So let's just go simple so that we can get people coming out for.
Right. Okay.
Well, one thought I have on this, and this is reminding me of the High Rise project, and I wanted to talk about that one, because really what I saw over and over in a lot of these high rise communities was people who cared. There was this impression that other people didn't care.
Yeah.
But we did surveys, and we found that 90% of people in the surveys would say, I care about waste, and I care about recycling and composting properly. And everyone thought their neighbors cared less than them. I was like, if you all say that you care and everybody thinks their neighbors doesn't care, you can't be talking about the same people. This doesn't really make sense. So I think there's always this impression that people don't care. And what we need to focus on is the positive. And a small team of people can maybe get together, and if you have the energy, you could maybe try to do the calculation on how much those individual cups cost and how much money the church is spending on waste. And you say, okay, if we had 50 cups, and how much of a bag would that take up? So here's how much that costs. And then, if you wanted to look into the model of your dishwasher and figure out how much water is going through, you could do that. But I think, a few general stats like the one that I shared about 500, the cup, something like that. So I think it's worth it. It's just maybe a small group of people hammering away at it. That's my best advice, is to don't get discouraged. But I see Hillary has a question or a comment maybe on this.
Oh boy. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Yes. So I had one good news story. Always good to hear that. Just to start off with is that on reusables is that my son is in his first year at Queen's, and they have this restaurant. And I think I must be through all the cafeterias. And what they have is they have like a plastic container for their food, and that's all they use. They have a carabiner, and it's just the thing they do. They get their food in a plastic container, and then they have they have to bring it back to get a new carabiner, right? So they bring the carabiner to the place where they're doling out the food. They pass in their carabiner. They get the plastic. They come back. When they give the plastic back in, they get a carabiner. And it's like it's like such a non-issue. And then if you need, like, because I was not coming back, I was like, I need to get disposable. They're like, it's like quote unquote compostable, but they're like, it's like 20 cents, you know that, right? So they're charging for that. So it was a really positive thing, and just no waste at all. So that is kind of amazing with that system.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, the question I have is actually about just sort of some small questions. One is, when is styrofoam going to be completely banned? Because it's like toxic from, from its production to its use with the coatings, and then also in its disposal. And the other question would be, when you're composting your kitchen waste, is it really that bad to use a compostable bag? I know it will get ripped up and thrown in the landfill, but wouldn't it be better to have like compostable things that are in the landfill, even if they maybe don't break down because there's not enough oxygen, but like just even, I wonder how important it is for us to change. And I can't ever find any recycling bags or garbage bags. It's very hard to find ones that are compostable. So how important is that, or, that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have good news. So first of all, thanks for that example from you said your son's at Queen's. That's great. Yeah. Humber College actually has that. They started that this year too. They have a little clamshell container. I know U of T had a bit of a test on this, and the Metropolitan University, formerly Ryerson, I guess it's TMU, they also have a container like that. It's a really cool system, right? You just make it easy and convenient, and it's lower cost than buying new clamshells. So I think that's great, and that's a good example of how it can work. Campuses are also like arenas and stadiums in that they're closed environments. People don't take that home. They're living on campus, they're eating on campus, they're just kind of doing it there. For styrofoam, it's going to be banned December 2023. Yeah, so part of at least foodware, not all types of styrofoam, but as part of the federal single-use plastic ban, problematic foodware containers and styrofoam and black plastic were the two that were listed because they're technically recyclable in some universe, according to some lab, but they're really, really difficult to recycle. And they have so many other problems. And like you said, styrofoam is just toxic at every stage of its life cycle. And the recycling is just ridiculously expensive and not really possible. So that will be banned. I think there's going to be a few cases where it's still allowed. Like I think maybe when it's protecting like fish or chicken, just because of concerns about food safety. Not ideal, but we made a lot of good progress. So there's not going to be styrofoam cups or styrofoam clamshells.
Will that include grocery stores, which have so much of this, both styrofoam bottoms or clamshell packaging?
The styrofoam clamshells, yes. Also, some of those clear clamshells are actually another type of extruded polystyrene or expanded polystyrene. Yeah. I don't know. Those ones will be banned, but sometimes you can make those clear clamshells out of number 1 or number 2 plastic. Those aren't banned.
Okay.
We're pushing to have the federal government expand the ban to cover all that type of stuff. But, for now, it's just going to be things like the styrofoam clamshells you get at a takeout food place, styrofoam cups, and plates.
Okay.
And then your last question about compostable bags. I remember, I don't even know if it was a dream. I remember one day being able to go buy organics bags for my organics bin that weren't compostable. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad they're not compostable because they don't cost more and they fit my organics bin perfectly. But it seems like if you want to buy bags just for your organics bin, let's say you don't get plastic bags from the store because you're carrying your own cloth bags, it seems that always the ones that are designed for your organics bin are compostable ones. I still think that they're not great because of the higher upstream footprint of creating compostable plastics. Some municipalities, though, outside of Toronto that don't use the same anaerobic digester system as Toronto, they actually require that because their composting system does break those down. So I would still say save your money, and if you can, use like a bread bag or a milk bag or anything else if you have it.
So you're saying that the biodegradable plastics, the compostable plastics, actually are worse for the environment to create than regular plastic. Is that what you're saying?
It seems like that. The problem with these life cycle assessments is that they're highly, highly sensitive to things like where was it made? How far did it get trucked? What conditions were it composted in? So I know that for compostable cups and compostable like PLA, is what compostable plastic is. Those compostable plastic clamshells, they are worse for the environment than a regular plastic clamshell. So they have a higher footprint.
Well, I was interested in your comment as well about the expected increase in the use of plastics by either 2030 or 2040 was like tripling. And I think it's because the oil and plastics industry knows that we're phasing out some things like fuel for automobiles. And so they want to make sure they keep using it for other products. So they're ramping up new ways to use plastic.
It's exactly it. They are banking on it because plastic is made also from the byproducts of refining oil and gas.
Yep.
So they've got this stuff. They've got to make themselves more profitable. So they're really looking at increasing plastic use, which most people are surprised by because we all think, oh, don't we all know that plastic is kind of on the way out and we need to stop using it, but they're just increasing production.
I have just a question and a comment about the compostables. First of all, I noticed this year for the first time when I was picking up some of the city compost at our local park, there was an awful lot of plastic pieces in it this year. I'd never noticed it before. And I just wondered whether you had heard about this or why that would be with the type of unit that there is there that normally skims off all the plastic. I mean, there was a ton. And I was constantly picking out plastic as I was using the stuff. So that's one question or comment. And the other one, I heard on CBC radio just this week, I think, there was a little bit of a thing about the new plastics regulations, the single use. And there were a lot of restaurant owners across the country who were interviewed. And so many of them thought that they were doing the right thing in, providing their, the compostable, mostly, cups or whatever, cutlery, whatever. And they were shocked to find that, in fact, they were, being phased out and those would not be available to them. And I thought, wow, I mean, this information about compostable stuff has been around for quite a while. And yet, obviously, businesses have been taking advantage of people trying to do the right thing. And certainly I've been telling people all the time because our church, some people organizing events at church thought, oh, I'll do this. And I'm going, no, don't buy that. But it is, there still seems to be that idea out there that it is better. And I'm sorry to hear about the bin plastic because in fact, it is hard, and we don't go through enough bread bags, and we're totally out of the old plastic bags. So that we just for the first time bought those things last week because we needed something. So
yeah, I've bought them too, and again, it's that thing where I say don't get bogged down by guilt. Yeah. I do this every day, and if I felt guilty about every single thing I did, I wouldn't be able to do my job. And I one day realized that I was like, you know what? For that, single parent living in North End of Scarborough that spends 3 hours a day on a bus and picks up some takeout food, I'm not going to make them feel guilty about their choice. We need to change the system so it's easy for everyone, and it's not just the people who have the time to do that sort of shopping. So, I get those compostable bags. For the organics and the city's compost system, I don't know specifically, but I do know that one area that we've actually been advocating on at the city since I started at T, like more than 10 years ago, was that the city had one organic digester. And we said, you're probably going to need 2 or 3 if you actually project out and everybody actually uses the green bin. They're like, no, we don't think people will really like it that much. We don't think people in high rises will use it. And then they quickly ran out of space. So the city actually sends a whole bunch of organics to be processed by another third-party processor, and so they might have a different process that doesn't remove the plastics at the front. So some of the other processors remove it at the end, so they might not get as much out. So that's why I'm excited that they doubled the size of their first processor. It's online now. The second one was also increased in size. It's going to be online later this year. And so each year the city is sending less and less to third-party processors. And that means it's higher quality and it's actually lower cost for the city.
Great, thanks. That explains it, and thanks for that info. There's
I saw some other questions here.
Question. So we'll go with the ones on the chat first, and then we can do that. So Grace was saying, what are the reasons that a business might give for not accepting customers' containers, and what are the solutions?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's, I think it's complicated. I think the solution I can say is that I think the city of Toronto, like some other cities have done this, but the city of Toronto has been reluctant to do it, have given really clear information on here's how to safely accept someone's reusable cup. So you don't have to grab the person's cup, take it behind the counter, and then fill it and then give it back. You can just pour your coffee, from the pot into the person's cup. Or the Tim Hortons near my work at one point, they had like their own sort of cup. So they would fill it up behind the counter and then they would pour it into my cup for me. So there are some processes that can happen, but not all business owners can figure that out. They're busy, they're tired, they're running a business, they're, down to the bone in terms of profit. They maybe don't have the time to figure out what kind of process can I do. They're not sure whether they're allowed to do it. They can legally refuse if they think your container doesn't look clean. They don't want to be held liable for if your container looks scratched and dirty or like it might have contamination in it, and then you get sick. So for cities like Vancouver and Edmonton, where they're encouraging businesses to accept that, they're giving those guidelines and saying, here are the steps to follow. Create your policy, put up a poster, and you can tell customers if they don't follow your policy, then we won't take it. So I think some of them just aren't really sure what to do. I saw a question here about the City of Toronto giving a presentation to the church. I just wanted to quickly mention that. I would encourage you to contact them again. Maybe, Deborah, you can tell me, when did you ask them to give the presentation to your group?
It's before COVID, so.
Mm-hmm. So I know there's been a lot of staff changes, and I know at one point they had fewer outreach and education staff. So they might have more now. So I would encourage you to contact them again and ask if they can give a presentation to help. The other thing is that the city has a lot of posters. You can get these great posters. I don't know if you've seen them. We had them in some of our high-rise buildings. But it's like a poster with 3 streams. Like, here's what goes in the organics, here's what goes in the garbage, here's what goes in the recycling.
We have them up.
Okay.
We have a green team and they're up. But I mean, we have people that say, an example would be the paper plates. Are they coated or are they not? Do they go in the green bin or do they go in the recycle bin? Or do they go in the garbage? The picture doesn't tell you some of those things.
Yeah. I'd say my rule of thumb is if it feels like it's a really, really thick coating, I'm just like, oh, this feels too coated. I usually put it, if it's got food on it, I put it in the organics bin. And if it's clean, I put it in the recycling. Because, if you think of like a cardboard box that has a coating on it, you still put those in the recycling bin and they figure it out.
Yeah. I do the rip test. Like if it looks like it's got a coating on it, and so people are kind of not sure, if it rips easily, I figure, okay, it can go in the compost. But that's with the paper cups too. Like you can tell if there's a coating on it, and so it won't actually, like Tim Hortons cups, you can't rip. It just sort of shows you that it really is a significant amount of plastic.
Yeah, but so some of our organizers want to do the right thing, just disagree at the church thing for separating afterwards. So so if somebody could come and we could actually say, these are the things we use, where do we put them afterwards? Something like that would be just helpful.
Or say, hey, we're not sure where this one goes, and then maybe switch to a different paper plate or reusables, but what you can do.
I've seen a question about the large detergent bottles for dishwashing or particularly clothes washing. If you're not familiar with True Earth, they have these simple sheets like this, that basically a half of this sheet is your clothes washing solution. We've been using them for 2 years. They clean just as well, and it comes in a recyclable cardboard container. So,
wow, awesome! Thank you, Peter.
Yeah,
I've started using
True Earth.
Yeah, There are others that have that as well. Nature Clean has a similar product, and there's another one as well. I've forgotten what it is that actually I found when I got it that it works better than True Earth. But yeah, so I mean, there is that sort of get rid of packaging movement on some things like personal care items as well, which is great.
And a number of the stores
is expanding to other products as well.
Yeah, True Earth is something you can find at Canadian Tire and Loblaws almost anywhere. I'd say in terms of buying bulk, though, there are a lot of new bulk stores. Like there's actually a few stores in Toronto that will deliver things to you in like a jar. So there's one called Saponetti, and they provide like soap and detergents and different things. And I was just looking it up. I think it's called Let's Go Zero Waste is a website. And you can just look at different parts of the city and you can see which bulk and zero waste stores are in your neighborhood. So that was pretty cool.
Just a second.
I see another question here about where does the plastic in the blue bin go? I hope I can answer this one.
There.
Oh, and I see that you mentioned that I shop at the Eglinton St. George rummage sale, Donna. I love buying things secondhand. It's so much more fun. And yes, I miss all the rummage sales during COVID. It was so sad. So I just want to, talking a little bit about recycling. I know a lot of us have heard that statistic that, well, I don't know if you have, maybe I'm just in my waste world, that only 9% of plastic is actually getting recycled. I mentioned it in the presentation. I just want to clarify that doesn't mean that 9% of what goes in the blue box gets recycled. It actually means that there is so much plastic in our lives, very little that actually goes in the blue box. You think this computer I'm on is made of plastic. My toothbrush is made of plastic. Pens are made of plastic. There's so many plastic things, of plastic clothing and plastic shoes and plastic bits in cars. So much of that plastic isn't getting recycled. So it's about that, or things like black plastic or styrofoam or candy wrappers that aren't recyclable. So when we talk about only 9% getting recycled, it's because there's so much of it is not recyclable at all, and there isn't an efficient recycling system for it. Some companies right now, especially the ones who are taking the federal government to court to try to stop this plastic ban, they are arguing that you can do chemical recycling, or basically burning plastic to use as a type of fuel, and call that recycling, which is just horrific. It's basically just taking oil out of the ground and burning it as a fossil fuel after it's been used as packaging first. They're really trying to dress it up and greenwash it in different ways. So all of that's a long digression to say what goes in your blue box does get recycled. Ontario's quite lucky. We have 3 plastics manufacturers at least in Ontario, and a lot of them take recycled content. Number 1 and 2 plastics, if anyone's a nerd and looks at the number on the bottom of the container, those are really highly recyclable. They get turned, like there's actually a company in Ontario that recycles number 1 bottles to turn into their bottled water. So sometimes it gets turned into products like that. Sometimes it gets recycled into things like benches. The other sad fact about plastic is that most recycling systems aren't that efficient, and it tends to downcycle and downgrade each time, and you lose a lot, and it just kind of gets more and more brittle, and eventually it just stops being recyclable. In contrast to something like metal or glass, which you can recycle infinitely. They just get melted down and they can get turned into something new and 100 times. So I hope that sort of answers that question.
There was a previous question that I think we kind of skipped over.
Oh, sure.
Whether you knew the stats for how well businesses compost, how much organic waste from businesses is composted, and is it as good as residences?
Almost none, and no, it's terrible, is my quick answer. Ontario's, the regulations in Ontario, or waste is regulated by the province in Ontario. So municipalities are obliged to collect recycling and garbage from residents, although now we're going to a new system where companies that make packaging will be obliged to pick up from residents. It's called producer responsibility. We can do another presentation on that another time. But businesses are regulated under some regulations that were passed in 1994, are terribly enforced, and don't apply to most small businesses. The Ontario Auditor General actually wrote a report last year saying the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector, that's like the name for everything that's non-residential, is so bad, and there is no recycling enforcement on that sector. So any recycling you see at like the grocery store, the shopping mall, they're either doing that for image or they're doing because it saves them money, because something like cardboard is very valuable. So that's sad news. Most businesses don't do very good on that. Some of them recycle. So major grocery stores actually
in malls
Sorry?
and stuff like that, they have the 3 tops to the bin, but it all is going into one bin.
Yeah, sometimes it does get separated, and it depends. But I know, especially during the pandemic, and with changes to like international recycling markets, China stopped accepting plastic and recycling from other parts of the world. A lot of not like for-profit recycling companies realize it's not really profitable to recycle plastic and things like that. So if it's metal or glass, they'll take it and recycle it. They'll recycle paper and cardboard because those things are worth money. But a lot of the other stuff, they'll just take it and not necessarily recycle. Some of the major grocery stores will have like giant bins to take the wasted and spoiled food because it's just so heavy and there's so much of it. It's actually cheaper for them to compost it than to send it to landfill. So I can't say with certainty. Some major food businesses probably do okay at organics. Most mid-range ones don't do it at all. And then on main streets in Toronto, like on St. Clair or Yonge or Queen, where sometimes you see like those green bins out front of stores, those are small commercial businesses that are in a special category that they're eligible for City of Toronto waste collection. And that's because they have apartments above them. So you think about those small shops that have an apartment upstairs. So the city says we're obliged by the province to collect from those apartments. So as a small business, we'll pick up from you too. And they have amazing organics collection rates because they're getting great service from the city. So I don't know if that really answered your question, Lee, but I hope I threw a lot of information at you. I see a question. Why doesn't the city advertise that compostable single use is a ripoff? They actually sort of do. They're just not very good at advertising. If you go to the city's website, they actually say, don't use this stuff. It doesn't work. And they try to put posters up about it, but they're not. Maybe they don't want to look too.
Could you send that link? Could you send that link to us for where it is in the city where it says it's not? I mean, you don't have to do it right now, but
I think it might be in the sort of annual, good things, bad things that are given to every household. I might just go and grab mine, but I have a feeling it's in there in the last.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just grabbed a piece of paper.
Yeah, it used to be a full calendar, and now it's more just like a flyer thing.
A little booklet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can check on the city website, or I'm just writing down. I was going to send you guys some links later, if you want, or I could put them in the chat. Are there any other questions here that I missed? There's so many comments coming in. You guys have so much to ask. I love it. Hillary, I see your point about most businesses have very different rules, and that's because of what I said, right? The city sets the rules for city-served buildings, but any private company just calls another private company that offers waste services, and just the rules can be completely different.
Yeah.
It seems very hard to understand. And that's one reason why we always tell people, like, pay attention to the signs in the building you're in, because it can be different in every single one.
Yeah.
I put in the website for True Earth, but I put in a comma by mistake. So it's www.true.earth.
Right.
One thing I would say, Peter, about True Earth, I don't know if you found, but I was given some of that that was supposed to be unscented. And I'm really, I'm a pediatrician. I'm completely against, phthalates and scents. But the unscented is scented. Because I was like, great, unscented. And I was like, what the heck? So I don't know what you find, but their unscented does have scent, the one that I was given.
Interesting.
Oh, because we definitely order the fragrance free. And I have not noticed a scent to it.
Oh, okay.
No,
I have not either. Yeah.
We got one of our quarterly shipments that had a fragrance package by mistake, but they replaced it for me.
Okay, maybe it was a mistake because it was unscented and it wasn't. It was just like a batch error.
I've also found if you do go to True Earth, go for the platinum, because it's a tiny bit more expensive in some stores. In some stores, it's exactly the same if they carry both, and the platinum works better. I found. So just as a by the way.
Depends on your cleaning and how dirty your clothes get. We found for a seniors couple, the regular product works fine. My children have switched to using platinum for their grandchildren. So.
Yeah. I just wanted to, as we're sort of talking about different, like Leanne has posted, Simply Natural Canada supplies bar shampoo and deodorant too. I'm going to do my little promo. There is a company that we found when we were hiking the Bruce Trail back in 2019 up in the Bruce Peninsula section. And it was in Lion's Head, and they have this little market every Saturday morning. And somebody said, because I was saying, I want to get a bar of soap without all packaging. And they said, well, go to the market on Saturday morning. So we did. And there is this company called Georgian Bay Soap Works. And I have promoted them to everybody I know. That not only do they have things in bulk, but things like deodorants and shampoo bars and the conditioner. That's the one I really like. It's all in, cardboard containers. And so it's produced in a solar powered facility. I mean, how good can you get? So, I mean, it's got, so I just would highly recommend it. The conditioner comes as sort of a little paste, and you take a little tiny bit when your hair is still wet, and it lasts. I mean, it costs about $20 or whatever, but it lasts forever. So it just, if you're looking for other places like that, and they have a lot of different shampoo bars and things like that, and they're great. So anyway.
Any chance any of their soaps can actually be used in a lake safely? Probably not.
Well, the problem with using soaps in a lake isn't just the soap, right? It's the stuff that comes off of our bodies when we clean with soap that goes into the lake as well.
Yeah, but we're going swimming anyway without it, so.
Yeah. I mean, it would be as safe as any, I think, but
I'm trying to get grandkids to bathe once in a while, and they don't want to use the tub at the cottage. So,
cool. I just shared
are there any other questions here? There's one. Hillary asked, "Can you talk about recycling contamination? How much has to be thrown out if one food covered plate, etc., is thrown in?" Okay, if there's one bag that has some contamination, does the whole bag get thrown in the garbage? That kind of thing. Is that what you're meaning, Hillary? Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's hard to say. I can't show you now because I think we got to wrap up. But I would encourage you to look up. Wonder if you can find it. Just like how a city's recycling facility works. So the way it is that all your recycling is getting dumped in with a whole bunch of other people's recycling, and it's going on this big machine, and it's kind of sorting it out. So if the contamination spread over large amounts of stuff, someone might see it and pull it off the line. But if you had one thing in the bottom of your recycling bin, they're not necessarily going to stop that. It's hard to say. Yeah, it's a little bit like it's opaque. It depends on the thing. It depends on where it's going. It depends on what stage in the process it gets pulled out. I can say that the City of Toronto, because we have single stream recycling, which is like all different containers and paper and everything goes into the same bin, it's more convenient, but it is generally considered around the world to be a more contaminated form of recycling because you get wet cups or things with a little bit of sauce or a little bit of oil on them, and that spills onto the paper and lowers the quality of the paper. So it can still be recycled, it's just lower quality. And the city right now has a contamination rate over 25%. And that's also because people putting the wrong stuff in the bin, more so than contamination. It's people putting clothing in the bin. They're like, oh, I heard you can recycle textiles. It's like, in a blue box. So people throw that in there. They throw hoses, they throw electronics, they throw toys in. So when those things are in there, that creates problems for the city. Because the City of Toronto is moving to a new producer responsibility system, which is that instead of the city paying for recycling, it's the companies that made all of that crappy packaging in the first place. They're going to have to pay for the recycling. So until now, what happens is the city pays for the recycling, then they report how much they've recycled to the province. And then companies like Nestle and Unilever and Mondelez International and Coca-Cola and Starbucks, they all say, okay, we'll cover 50% of the city's bill, and they cover 50% of the recycling. But starting in July 1st, 2023, Toronto's going to be one of the first cities in Ontario that are switching to this new system where those companies pay for the whole cost. and they're in charge of it. It's their job to make sure it gets collected. It's their job to sort it and send it to a recycling place. And they're the ones who are legally responsible for proving that it got recycled. So instead of the city of Toronto having this legal obligation and potentially getting fined by the province if they don't do it right, now those companies will have it. So this is a system called extended producer responsibility. It's been operating in Europe for a number of years. Something like the beer store is an example of producer responsibility. Beer bottles don't go in the blue box. It is exchange between the brewers and people who drink beer. And if it goes in the blue box, someone else takes it out, right? They're paying for it. It's their waste. We shouldn't think that it's our waste. So it's great that these companies are taking the system over. We still have doubts. Big surprise, this provincial government is not the greatest on environmental regulations and environmental rigor. So their targets on the plastic recycling are very low. Their targets and their enforcement is going to be really low. But, fingers crossed, in a few years, we'll have a different government and we'll have a new system and we can push for higher targets. And hopefully a lot of this plastics that aren't recyclable anyway will be banned by the federal government. So, the reason I mention that is the producers, when they take over the system, they're going to tolerate a lot lower contamination. So that's one good thing, is they're going to demand better recycling from Torontonians. I don't know how they're going to do it. They're going to have to do a lot more education. They're going to have to do more inspections. That's the system that's been working in BC for the last few years, and they have lower contamination there. And I think it might partly be because they have deposit return systems and other ways of collecting things, but contamination we'll see how it works.
Mm-hmm. Just as an aside, when I was back at a high school and in charge of the green team there at a high school, what the city told us when we were doing waste audits, and we were appalled by the amount of contamination because the kids were not following the rules, even though the signage was good, et cetera, et cetera. And they said 10%. That's your goal. If you have contamination rate of 10%, or up to 10%, that's okay. Anything more than 10%, that's going to be a real problem. So that was the that's what they were telling us. And this was like 10 years ago, for what it's worth. Yeah.
Lower is always better. So it's, cool.
Are there any other questions?
Has her hand up for something?
Oh.
I just had a quick question just about how you find young people are with recycling. I'm personally really disappointed in the young people that I see in my life. And I just think, oh my gosh, it's actually, I've had me lose hope, because I'm like, okay, these kids have been talking about waste and recycling and since junior kindergarten, and I am more, so I don't know, is it just teenagers, or is it what do we have to look forward to with the future if this generation doesn't care? What do you see? I guess the question is, what do you see in young people? Is it
what I would say is, it's not that people don't care. It's that waste and recycling is incredibly complicated, and it's not our fault. It's the companies that make this stuff that deliberately make it very confusing, or they're not making efforts to make it more recyclable. So
no, but I was interrupted to say, no, it's actually not this. What I'm seeing is people like my daughter, just throwing garbage in the garbage, plastic in the garbage, or it is possible to bring reusable cups. None of her friends are using reusable cups anymore. They did for a brief period. She doesn't, to be honest, she's great, and she doesn't actually have any takeout stuff. But so I don't want to throw her under the bus. But in general, I don't see the teenagers. Even when it's easy, I don't know. Is that something that you see, or I don't know?
It's not. I also see a lot of really inspiring young groups of people who are super excited and starting up their own clothing repair and bike repair stuff.
That's true.
Like I said, I think there's pockets and there's mixes, and one other comment I have is that our human brains have sort of a negative bias, that we see the negative sometimes. So, for example, in high-rise buildings, we'd see this. You go down to the recycling bin, one person throws a black garbage bag on top of the recycling, or throws a jar of spaghetti and it spills all over everything. Every person who comes back into that building sees that recycling bin and says, oh, no one in this building cares, even if it was just one person who made that mistake. Yeah. So our brains tend to see the negative and focus on that, but most people are doing pretty well. Toronto has a pretty good recycling rate. Schools are doing pretty good recycling.
Okay.
I think it's more that people are busy and it shouldn't be so difficult to have to know all of these things and have to check a calendar and check a guide every time you're done with something. So
I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I know that there were a lot of other things going on, and it was a busy night for people, especially North Toronto Cluster people. So I'm really glad that you chose to come tonight, and I'd really like to thank Emily for joining us tonight and sharing her wealth of knowledge. If you have, so what we'll do, I'll make sure that, or Leanne and I will make sure that the recording link will go out to all of you, and you can send it to friends, family, whoever. And for those of us on the North Toronto team, we can post it in our individual congregations as well. So if there, and I'm sorry if I didn't greet people who arrived a little bit after we started. I'm really glad you came. And if anybody has any further comments, great. Otherwise, I think we're right at 8:30. Emily, I think, wow, what a great job you did with timing.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks everybody. I really appreciate the invitation. And I'll just quickly share, if you want to sign up for T's email and stay up to date, and also if you want to join our Reusable Toronto sort of push for reusables, that'd be great. And I'd be happy to send more resources after. If there was something that I mentioned during the presentation that you think would be of great help to this congregation, this group, please let me know and I can send it. So thanks again. And if you ever want another presentation from any of the other people at T, let me know. They're always happy to talk.
Oh, thank you for that, because we'll take that back to the drawing board and see if there's another topic we really want to get into, and have somebody else from T come another time. So, but thank you very, very much.